When historians talk about the politics of the northern kingdoms, about Nilfgaard's brutal invasions, the squabbling of kings, the fall of the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, they rarely mention Yennefer of Vengerberg. They praise Redania's spies, Edern's knights, and Philippa Eilhart's scheming, but they overlooked the woman who quietly pulled the strings, who turned losing battles into narrow victories, who forged alliances from distrust, and who built a force that would outlast empires. Yennefer's political power wasn't in crowns or armies. It was in her wit, her magic, and her unshakable belief that the North didn't have to fall to Nilfgaard, not if its leaders stopped fighting each other long enough to fight back. She was the invisible balance, the one who kept the northern kingdoms from collapsing under their own greed, and her influence runs deeper than anyone ever realized. Let's start with Thanedd Island, the fateful council that was supposed to unite the North, but nearly tore it apart. The Brotherhood of Sorcerers had called kings, nobles, and mages to negotiate a defense against Nilfgaard, but by the time Yennefer arrived, the room was a powder keg. Redania's king accused Adern of hoarding grain. Temeria's nobles bickered with Cadwin's mages, and a group of Nilfgaardian spies disguised as merchants lurked in the corners, waiting to stir chaos. Most mages focused on grand speeches or petty power plays. Philippa Eilhart argued for the Brotherhood to take control of all northern armies. Tessaya de Vries pleaded for caution. Yennefer did something different. She worked in the shadows. She cornered Redania's spymaster in a quiet corridor, slipping him a scroll of Nilfgaard's troop movements stolen from a dead messenger the week before and saying, "Your king thinks Adern is the enemy. Show him this, then ask if he'd rather fight elves or Nilfgaardian spears." She sat with Adern's queen, who was on the verge of surrendering, and told her, "Nilfgaard doesn't want your loyalty. It wants your land. Fight with Redania, and you keep your crown. Surrender, and you'll be a prisoner in your own castle." She even exposed the Nilfgaardian spies, not with a grand spell, but with a well-timed question that made their lies unravel. By the end of the council, the kings had agreed to a temporary alliance, and the Brotherhood had a plan to defend the Yaruga River. No one cheered for Yennefer. No one mentioned her name in their speeches. But everyone knew something had shifted. That shift was her. She didn't force the alliance. She persuaded it, using the one weapon no king could ignore, the truth. Her strategic mind didn't stop at diplomacy. It turned the tide of battles, too. Take the Battle of the Yaruga, when Nilfgaard's legions outnumbered the northern forces 3-1. The northern generals planned to meet Nilfgaard head-on, a suicidal charge that would have cost thousands of lives. Yennefer arrived the night before, her cloak caked in mud, and burst into their war tent. "You're not fighting an army," she said, slamming a map on the table. "You're fighting a machine, and machines have weak points." She pointed to a narrow gorge upstream, where Nilfgaard was moving its supply carts. Their mages are using chaos magic to keep the carts moving through the mud. If I disrupt that magic, the carts get stuck. No supplies, no army. The general scoffed. What use was a sorceress against thousands of soldiers? But Yennefer didn't ask for their trust. She asked for an hour. That night, she snuck into the gorge, her magic muted to avoid detection, and wove a spell that tangled the Nilfgaardian mage's powers. The carts ground to a halt, wheels sinking into the mud. By dawn, Nilfgaard's soldiers were hungry, their arrows running low. When the northern forces charged, Nilfgaard broke. It was hailed as a miracle of strategy. But the miracle had a name. Yennefer didn't stay to take credit. She was already gone, off to warn a village of a Nilfgaardian raiding party. That's how she worked. She saw the pieces no one else did, moved them into place, and let others take the glory. She didn't care about fame. She cared about keeping the North alive. But her greatest political legacy isn't an alliance or a battle. It's the Lodge of Sorceresses, the group she helped build to protect mages from kings and empires alike. After the Brotherhood of Sorcerers collapsed, ripped apart by infighting and Nilfgaard's assassins, mages became targets. Kings feared their power. Nilfgaard hunted them for sport. Common people burned them as witches. Yennefer knew they couldn't survive alone. She traveled from Aretuza to Kaer Morhen, from Novigrad to Sintra, gathering the most powerful female mages, Triss Merigold, Philippa Eilhart, Sabrina Glavissig, and others. The first meeting was tense. Philippa wanted the Lodge to control the Northern Kings. Sabrina wanted to declare war on Nilfgaard immediately. Triss just wanted to protect innocent mages. Yennefer cut through the noise. "We are not here to rule," she said, her voice steady. "We are here to survive, to protect each other, to make sure no king or emperor ever uses us as pawns again." She proposed a compromise. The Lodge would advise the northern kings, but not control them, defend villages from Nilfgaardian raids, and train young mages to use their powers wisely. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The Lodge became a force the North couldn't ignore. They stopped Redania from executing a group of innocent elves. They negotiated a peace between Temeria and Cadwin over a disputed mine. They even helped Ciri when she took refuge in Novigrad, hiding her from Nilfgaard's spies. The lodge didn't just protect mages, it protected the North's soul. And it was Yennefer who built it, not with magic or threats, but with trust. She made them see that their differences didn't matter, not when the alternative was extinction. Yennefer's political influence is a lesson in quiet power. She didn't need a crown or an army. She needed a sharp mind, a loyal heart, and the courage to do the work no one else wanted to do. She was the one who kept the northern kingdoms from falling apart when Nilfgaard came knocking. She was the one who turned mages from outcasts into protectors. She was the one who proved that you don't have to be loud to change the world. You just have to be relentless. The next time you hear about the Northern Kingdom's victories, about the Lodge of Sorceress's work, about the alliances that saved the North, remember Yennefer. She wasn't in the spotlight. She was in the shadows, moving the pieces, fixing the cracks, and making sure the North lived to fight another day. She was the invisible balance, and without her, the Northern Kingdoms would have fallen long ago. Vilgefortz of Roggeveen is remembered as the Witcher saga's most calculating villain. A man who craved power above all, who manipulated kings and mages alike, who set his sights on Ciri's elder blood as the key to godlike control. But for all his scheming, there's one piece of his plan he never quite accounted for: Yennefer of Vengerberg. She wasn't just a side target or a means to get to Ciri. She was a threat, a living, breathing crack in his armor, and her very existence derailed his plans more than any sword or spell Geralt ever wielded. Vilgefortz fixated on her not out of malice alone, but out of fear. Fear of her power, fear of her bond with Ciri, fear that she might be the one to undo everything he'd built. To understand Vilgefortz's failure, you first have to understand how Yennefer became the unseen thread that unraveled his grand design. Let's start with the fixation, the quiet, burning obsession that drove Vilgefortz to hunt Yennefer as fiercely as he hunted Ciri. He didn't want her dead. He wanted her broken. Yennefer was one of the few sorceresses in the continent capable of wielding chaos magic at its highest form, a talent Vilgefortz both envied and feared. But more than that, she was the only person Ciri truly trusted. Ciri's elder blood was wild, untamed. Vilgefortz knew he couldn't control it unless he controlled the one person who could calm it. He'd seen it in Kaer Morhen, the way Ciri's magic settled when Yennefer held her hand, the way she turned to Yennefer for guidance before anyone else. Break Yennefer, he told his lieutenants, and Ciri will follow. She'll have no one left to trust. So he set his trap. He leaked false information about a safe haven for mages in Novigrad, knowing Yennefer would go not for herself, but for the young sorcerers she'd promised to protect. When she arrived, he was waiting. His mages surrounded her, his magic binding hers, his smile cold as he said, "Finally, the last piece." His fixation wasn't just about Ciri. It was about eliminating the only force that could stand between him and the power he craved. Yennefer wasn't a pawn. She was a barrier. And Vilgefortz knew he had to take her down first. Her capture and escape, though framed as a personal struggle, sent ripples through the entire main quest. Ripples that Vilgefortz never saw coming. He locked her in a cell beneath his fortress in Stygia Castle, a chamber warded with anti-magic runes to drain her power. He interrogated her for weeks, asking about Ciri's location, about the Elder Blood secrets, about how to control it. Yennefer never broke. She lied, she taunted, she refused to give him even a scrap of useful information. But she didn't just resist, she observed. She listened to his conversations with Nilfgaardian ambassadors, learning of his plan to use Ciri's blood to open a portal to another world, one where he could rule unchallenged. She studied the runes on her cell walls, memorizing their patterns so she could break them later. She even befriended a guard, a young mage who'd been forced to work for Vilgefortz, and convinced him to smuggle her a small vial of chaos magic potion. When she finally escaped, she didn't just run. She left a trail of destruction. She sabotaged his laboratory, destroying the equipment he'd planned to use on Ciri. She freed the other prisoners, young mages he'd been experimenting on, and she left a false map, leading Vilgefortz to believe Ciri was hiding in the Blue Mountains. A trap Geralt and Ciri were waiting to spring. Her escape wasn't just a victory for herself. It was a blow to Vilgefortz's timeline. He'd lost weeks of preparation, lost critical equipment, lost the element of surprise, and it was all because he'd underestimated her. He thought she was just a sorceress. He didn't realize she was a strategist. But Yennefer's greatest impact came in the small, quiet ways she undermined his grand scheme. The moments no one else noticed, but that chipped away at his power until it crumbled. Take, for example, the day Vilgefortz planned to steal the heart of the Elder Tree, a relic that would amplify his control over Ciri's blood. He bribed a group of dryads to let him pass through Brokilon Forest, promising to leave their home unharmed. Yennefer, who heard of the plan from the guard she had befriended, arrived first. She talked to the dryads, not with threats, but with truth. She told them Vilgefortz planned to burn the forest once he had the relic, to use its magic to fuel his portal. The dryads didn't just refuse to help Vilgefortz, they attacked him, driving him out of the forest and destroying the relic before he could take it. Another example, Vilgefortz had convinced a faction of the Lodge of Sorceresses to betray Yennefer, promising them power in his new world. Yennefer found out, and instead of confronting them angrily, she sat with them. She told them about Vilgefortz's experiments, about the prisoners he'd tortured, about the world he planned to build, a world where mages were just tools, not equals. One by one, the mages turned on Vilgefortz, leaking his plans to the northern kingdoms and even helping Geralt track him to Stygga Castle. Even in the final battle, Yennefer's hand was invisible. She used her magic to disrupt Vilgefortz's portal, buying Ciri time to master her elder blood powers. She healed Geralt when he was wounded, keeping him in the fight. She even used a forbidden spell to bind Vilgefortz's magic, leaving him vulnerable to Ciri's final strike. Vilgefortz's mistake was simple. He saw Yennefer as a means to an end. He never saw her as a threat. He never saw that her power wasn't just in her magic, but in her heart. Her love for Ciri, her loyalty to her friends, her refusal to let anyone be used as a pawn. He built his plan on fear and greed. She destroyed it with courage and love. In the end, the Witcher saga's greatest villain fell not because of a sword or a spell, but because of the unseen threads he'd ignored. The threads woven by Yennefer of Vengerberg. She wasn't in the spotlight. She wasn't the one who delivered the final blow. But she was the one who unwove his plan, one small act of resistance at a time. And that's the lesson. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the one that shines the brightest. It's the one that lingers in the shadows, quiet and unyielding, until it's time to strike. Open any Witcher fan forum, scroll through a gallery of fan art, or listen to a podcast debating the saga's greatest characters, and one name rises above the rest, Yennefer of Vengerberg. She isn't just a side character or a love interest for Geralt. She's the beating heart of the franchise's most enduring conversations, about power, about family, about what it means to choose your own destiny. Long after the final battle with Vilgefortz, long after Ciri rides off to forge her own path, Yennefer lingers in the lore, not because of her magic or her role in the main quest, but because she's human-flawed, fierce, and unapologetically herself. Her legacy isn't tied to the story's end. It's tied to how she reshaped the way fans see The Witcher's core themes, and how she continues to define what it means to be a complex, compelling character in fantasy. Let's start with her hold on fan perception. The Witcher is often praised for its gritty realism, its rejection of hero's journey, tropes, and its unflinching look at moral ambiguity, and Yennefer embodies all of that. Fans don't just like her, they analyze her. They debate her choice to leave Geralt in Season 2 of the show, not as a betrayal, but as an act of self-preservation. They gush over her quiet moments with Ciri baking lumpy bread, fixing a torn cloak, not because they're cute, but because they reveal a side of her rarely seen in fantasy, a powerful woman who craves connection as much as she craves control. They defend her flaws too, her stubbornness, her occasional impulsivity, her fear of being vulnerable, because those flaws make her relatable. She's not a perfect sorceress or a noble hero. She's a woman who's fought for every scrap of power she has, who's lost and grieved and made mistakes, and still chooses to do good. This complexity turns her into more than a character. She becomes a lens through which fans explore The Witcher's biggest questions. What does it mean to be strong? Can you heal from a painful past? Is family something you're born into, or something you choose? Yennefer doesn't just answer these questions. She makes fans ask them, long after they've finished the books or the games. That's the mark of a legacy that outlives the main story. Now, let's dare to ask the what-ifs, the questions that reveal just how irreplaceable Yennefer is. What if she'd never taught Ciri to control her elder blood? Ciri would have been a raw, untamed force, easy prey for Vilgefortz, who would have used her power to tear open portals and conquer the continent. The Wild Hunt would have snatched her long before she learned to fight back, and Geralt would have been left with nothing but guilt and a broken law of surprise. What if she'd never brokered the alliance at Thand? The northern kingdoms would have bickered themselves into ruin, falling to Nilfgaard's armies one by one. Novigrad would have burned, Kaedwen would have surrendered, and the continent would have become a wasteland of Nilfgaardian rule. What if she'd never built the Lodge of Sorceresses? Mages would have remained outcasts, hunted, burned, or forced to serve tyrants. There would have been no one to protect young sorcerers, no one to push back against kings who feared magic, no one to keep the balance between power and compassion. And what if she never challenged Geralt's neutrality? He'd still be a lone wolf drinking in taverns, taking contracts, and running from his emotions. He'd never have learned to love, never have become a father to Ciri, never have found a home. The Witcher saga, in short, would have been a tragedy, a story of loss and despair, not of hope and redemption. Yennefer isn't just a part of the story. She's the reason it has a happy ending at all. But her greatest legacy lies in the archetype she redefined, the powerful woman in fantasy. For too long, fantasy female characters were split into two boxes: the damsel in distress, helpless, waiting to be saved, or the warrior queen, cold, unfeeling, stripped of vulnerability. Yennefer smashes those boxes. She's a sorceress who can level a village with a wave of her hand. But she also cries when she thinks about her childhood, when she fears she'll never be a mother, when she worries she's not good enough for Geralt. She's fiercely loyal, willing to die for Ciri, to betray kings for the North, to forgive Geralt for his mistakes. But she's also unafraid to stand up for herself, to walk away when she's being used, to demand respect. This blend of power and vulnerability isn't just refreshing, it's revolutionary. It's why characters like Daenerys Targaryen before her descent, or Aelin Galathinius from Throne of Glass, echo Yennefer's energy. It's why tabletop RPG players create sorceresses, inspired by Yennefer, not just for her magic, but for her heart. It's why young fans see her and think, I can be strong and soft. I can be powerful and flawed. Yennefer doesn't just exist in the Witcher universe. She's changed the way fantasy tells stories about women forever. Years from now, when people talk about the greatest fantasy characters of all time, Yennefer of Vengerberg will be there, not because of her role in a quest, but because of who she is. She's a reminder that power isn't about never being afraid. It's about being afraid and fighting anyway. That family isn't about blood. It's about choosing to love someone, even when it's hard. That legacy isn't about statues or songs. It's about the way you make people see the world and themselves differently. The Witcher saga may end, but Yennefer's legacy doesn't. She lives in the fan art that captures her laughing with Ciri, in the debates about her choices, in the young girls who pick up a magic wand or a sword and think, I want to be like her. She's timeless, not because she's perfect, but because she's real. And in a genre that often struggles with authenticity, that's the greatest gift of all.